So Sonic Movie 3 has been released and it's been out for a couple weeks with extremely strong review scores and confirmation of a fourth movie coming in 2027. And at this point, all there's left to do is reflect on the journey along the way and look forward to what's next. What's amazing about this film franchise is that we know we're properly set up for a lot of possibilities for what the future could bring for us because we got several post-credit scenes in Sonic Movie 3. We'll put some spoilers on the screen in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We know we're set up for a wild future because the Sonic Movie 3 post-credit scenes introduces at least 2 new characters to the film franchise, one of which being a fan favorite, which is Amy Rose. The question is going to be, how are they going to write her? What the hell is she even doing in New York or on Sonic's planet? And also we have the introduction of Metal Sonic, who also, we have to have a lot of questions about this because it's presumed that Jim Carrey could potentially be dead. So who created Metal Sonic? Why is there multiple Metal Sonics? Is there like a true one-of-one Metal Sonic that's kind of like the ringleader behind all the Metal Sonics that maybe transforms into Neo Metal Sonic? We also can't forget that Shadow the Hedgehog was found alive at the end of Sonic Movie 3. The question is, where exactly is he? Is Shadow on a different planet because he was warped somewhere else from the Ark? Did he save Dr. Eggman? I'm sure that's going to be a big topic of contention as we wait to figure out whether or not Jim Carrey will return. Shadow was pretty much the best character in the movie. A lot of people love him, and I'm pretty sure they left his backstory a little bit ambiguous and vague because they're going to want to explore his backstory in a future project. I think the next thing that should come is some type of Shadow spin-off series on Paramount Plus, or potentially a movie for the big screens. That would be even better. We know that he came from a different planet in this comet that clearly looks like some type of Black Arms alien thing, so I think they're gonna maybe go that route if they choose to do a Shadow spin-off project. But then again, will he come back to Earth for Sonic Movie 4? Will he be even in the 4th movie? Who knows? But to be honest, I think a lot of this is obviously fluid and subject to change, and I don't think there's truly much thought put into this concept yet because a lot of things are still up in the air as we don't know whether or not Jim Carrey is going to return. But as we discussed previously in a video, it seems like he's open to the idea of returning for the 4th movie. So the point is, in order to look forward, we have to look backwards and reflect on the past. One reason being is because a lot of concept art for Sonic Movie 3 has just come out, so it's cool to analyze it and we can kind of see where these movies were in concept and then how they ended up playing out. Concept art is not something that's certainly unique to the Sonic franchise, but it is important to kind of celebrate and look at the history of it because, we got some cool concepts over the years that show us things like Terios the Hedgehog and how other various designs in the franchise were going to play out. So recent concept art that was just discovered also gives us a glimpse into a cut concept from Sonic Movie 3 that, hey, maybe could potentially work in the 4th movie considering we know new characters that are going to be in it. More on that later, so if you want to skip around towards the end of the video, we'll discuss that topic. I want to talk about the first piece of concept art that was recently revealed, and that shows us some extra scenes that could have been in Sonic Movie 3. If you look at this tweet from Jeff Fowler, he says, "Fun Sonic Movie 3 fact. In an early version of the story, Robotnik and Stone hid out in Mexico. To keep tighter story pacing, we decided to eliminate the change of location and stage the first meeting with Team Sonic in Tokyo, but the Doctor's love of telenovelas remained. By looking at the art, we're able to get a little bit of a glimpse of where Robotnik would have been hiding out. So his little crab base is still active and still on the scene, but also if you look over to the right, it seems like there's some type of gas station there. So I think this could potentially be where he would have been hiding out. You also notice Knuckles was trying to fight the crab, and then you'll see Sonic and Tails next to Agent Stone, who is putting gas in the giant crab. I wonder how much gas this thing takes. Probably not great on gas. And then also we get a different look at what the washed up version of Eggman would have looked like. So we see him watching telenovelas on the screen, which leads to some of the most iconic lines in movie 3. We see Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles looking a bit distraught. For some reason, Knuckles has groceries. And you'll see Eggman looking pretty much how we found him in movie 3 with the burrito, but also for some reason he has Sonic's quills already. So potentially that could be the reason why he may have survived. We have another tweet from Jeff Fowler that shows how the story could have been adjusted for Sonic Movie 3 and how this movie could have been different than what we saw on the screen. So he said, "More Sonic Movie 3 concept art. This is one of my favorite images we've ever produced on these films. And yes, the story was a little different in this quote-unquote dream version. Remind me to tell you about it sometime." And hopefully he does. In this picture of the concept art, we see Shadow and Maria holding hands on the moon, which looks eerily similar to the shot with Sonic and Shadow on the moon together after the big fight. So I guess clearly the image was strong enough for him that he wanted to include it in the film one way or the other, and this was certainly a great way to do so. The way he talks about it in this scene, that maybe it was some type of dream that Shadow was having, so maybe there is going to be a little bit more emphasis on some of Shadow's backstory. While I'm not really displeased with how his story was handled, I thought it was actually one of the better parts, but there's certainly some things that maybe they could have added to that. They don't have to put it in movie 3 because I'd love to see them go deeper into like Shadow spin-off with some of these concepts. So this is just another example of how the movies could have looked a little bit different than what we saw, but this isn't the biggest best example, I would say. Jeff Fowler also shared more concept art, which in principle doesn't really change what happened in the movie, but kind of changes the way that we would have digested this scene. He says, double your villains, double your fun. Here's an early piece of Sonic Movie 3 concept art that we created to showcase the idea of two Robotniks breaking into the gun headquarters. And based off of the picture, it shows a little bit more of a menacing version of Gerald Robotnik. He also has some type of ray gun, and it seems like there's a bit more of like a firefight within the gun headquarters. So I think this would have been a little bit cooler to see, because the scene that we got, we got the Jim Carrey dancing stuff, which when I first saw the movie, I actually hated this scene. I did not really, it was amusing, but when I first saw the movie and I was looking at how much time we probably have left, I'm like, all right, like, come on, like, when are the villains gonna truly arrive and show their true colors and really like lock in? And then I saw the movie a second time and I was like, hey, that scene's not really that bad. And then I started going on TikTok, and every single video I would scroll is the Jim Carrey Eggman dancing song, people mimicking the dance, people replaying the scene, and it started to get more and more stuck in my head. And I started to realize that maybe this scene was actually peak fiction. Dare I say, this scene actually lives rent-free in my head at this point. Perhaps I was wrong this entire time, but regardless, this concept art does show us a little bit more of kind of what I was initially anticipating for Eggman and Gerald. I was anticipating more of that menacing and villainous vibe, which, certainly this art demonstrates. So now we'll do a little bit of rapid fire with some of the concept art, because a lot of this is pretty much similar to what played out in the story. It doesn't really affect what was actually going on in the film. So we have our first concept art of Shadow and Maria's first initial meeting. While this is pretty similar to how it played out in the movie, it's certainly a heart-touching and sad scene for Shadow. He looks very scared here. We also have additional concept art of the lab where Shadow ends up like kidnapping and scaring everyone. Shadow is up in the rafters before, I guess, he goes and attacks Tails or whatever. We don't necessarily see this part in the film from what I remember, but Shadow also looks like he's crying here for whatever reason. That's the main thing I like to point out. For whatever reason, he's just randomly crying up here. Perhaps we may have seen maybe a little bit more flashbacks during this point of the film. Maybe that dream scene from earlier could have been displayed during this part. In addition to that, we also have concept art of the Chow Garden, which shows a little bit more of the SA2 vibe they were going for. I don't remember in the movie if necessarily the part of the Chow Garden right here, which looks a little bit more similar to what you see in SA2, was in the film, but nonetheless, there's one thing that I thought that was interesting about this. I guess during the creation of the movie, when they were discussing the concept art, they actually made a little miniature for the Chow Garden for whatever reason. I don't know exactly how this plays into the production process, but they did make a little figurine, so maybe this helped them kind of figure out where some shots would be, or I really don't know why they did this. Next up, we have more images of Sonic exploring the lab, and one thing that we'll notice is you'll see Sonic is actually looking like Game Sonic here. He has the tan arms instead of the blue arms that he has in the film. Also, you'll notice in the top of the corner next to the Nickelodeon logo, you'll see Shadow up top. They didn't show Shadow hidden during this portion, so maybe this could have been another way they would have done the meeting. Perhaps it would have been similar, I mean, based off of the position of the characters, to the scene where he says, "I found you, Faker," in SA2. I mean, the position looks very similar, but obviously in the movie, it was more of a surprise attack. So maybe that was something that was cut for time. We also got additional concept art of Prison Island, which, there's not really much to say here of note, other than the fact that it looks pretty beautiful. It's a nice little sunset. There's no rain as of yet, which there was in the movie. But I wonder if this is maybe supposed to be a shot of the aftermath of the movie, or just another take on the beginning sequence of the movie. Last but not least, this is another take on a scene that does take place in the movie, so we won't spend too much time on it, but we have a picture of Sonic fighting Shadow in Tokyo, but it looks like they're on the side of a building. And also, Tails and Knuckles are a little bit more prominent in this shot because, as you know, in the main movie, Sonic runs off on his own when he fights Shadow, predominantly in Tokyo. So in the Tokyo scene, there isn't much of a 1v1 versus Sonic and Shadow. It's more Shadow running away on the bike, so this is kind of a cool reimagining of what could have happened. I just really like how this shot looks. Perhaps maybe they could have added an extra 30 or 45 seconds to the fight scene between Sonic and Shadow in the beginning, because we get this one and then we get the major one towards the end. They would have liked to seen a little bit more Sonic vs. Shadow action, but regardless, the action of the film is incredible, and this shot is a cool reimagining on what did already take place. Now, let's get into the big stuff, the thing that I think changes everything. So here it is. This is potentially the shot that changes everything and really has my mind racing as to what could have potentially been the plot of Sonic Movie 3. In this scene, you will see Super Sonic fighting Super Shadow in space. As you know, this didn't really take place in space. I mean, yes, there was some space travel for the Super Sonic vs. Super Shadow fight, but mainly takes place towards the end. But in this scene, the fight is predominantly taking place in space. And you'll also notice in the background, the Eclipse Cannon is legitimately destroying parts of the Earth. It's already firing. As we know, based off of what they say in the movie, the Eclipse Cannon has enough power to take out the Earth. So what does this mean? Could it have been possible that the villains in Sonic Movie 3 actually had succeeded, and potentially there's a time travel element that eventually needed to take place in the story? story. You know, prior to this movie's release, there was a storyboard leak, and one of the things that was mentioned in the storyboard leak was specifically time travel. Certainly, there's no way they would have let the Eclipse cannon actually hit and destroy the Earth unless they maybe go back in time to fix it or something. I don't know. Regardless, we know for a fact that this did not end up making it into the final movie because the Eclipse cannon does not hit the Earth. We know that during the development process of movies, things are obviously subject to change and things shift around. Here's concept art that released around the time that Sonic Movie 2 came out. So this concept art is about 2 years old, and we see the Project Shadow stuff. Looks a little bit different than how it turned out in the actual Sonic 3 movie, but also I want you to pay attention to this right here. So in the Sonic 2 concept art, you see a skeleton that looks like it was someone that worked in the lab. Also, if you look above that, you will see scribblings that look extremely similar to the scribblings of Gerald Robotnik, which did actually make it into Sonic 3. Pretty much when everyone saw this concept art, everyone assumed it was Gerald because Gerald is dead in the Sonic games. When Gerald Robotnik first bursted onto the scene in the first Sonic Movie 3 trailer, everybody thought that time travel was going to play a factor into this because throughout the entire history of the franchise, he was presumed to be dead. And, you know, obviously this is a different interpretation, but I do genuinely believe that time travel is something they wanted to explore. One, because of Gerald's inclusion in the film. It turns out he's 110 years old in this version of the film, and Shadow's quill kept him alive. But also, time travel was mentioned in the storyboard leak, so I'm not inside these people's head, but this concept art does kind of feel like time travel may have been in play. You know where time travel does take place in? That would happen to be Sonic CD, which, by the way, also features Metal Sonic and Amy, the two characters that appear in the Sonic 3 post-credit scene. So, what does all this mean? I feel like the willingness to explore time travel means potentially it could be a big factor in the next Sonic movie. If they're truly going to adapt elements of CD, it's certainly possible that time travel could play a factor. Maybe that is why there are multiple Metal Sonics in the story, and that previous concept art of the final battle of movie 3 plus the storyboard leaks kind of lends me to believe that they may even try to go bigger for the fourth film. You know, due to the fact that Shadow could potentially be alive, perhaps he did chaos control and it threw the timeline off, and now everything's all in flux. Regardless, the Sonic Movie 3 concept art is amazing because it shows you how cool things were in concept and then what actually made it into the film, etc., and you kind of get to see the design process of everything. While it's sad that Sonic Movie 3 is over, it's amazing that we still have all this time to speculate and make theories until the fourth movie arrives. Let me know what you think about this new concept art. Does this change your perspective on concepts that were going to take place in Sonic Movie 3 and now potentially Sonic Movie 4?